No, no buzz. I just Bees Book Club. I finally officially read all of Yoko Ogawa's works translated to English this time. Um, final, final one I needed to do was Revenge, 11 Dark Tales. Fuck, man. I read this the better part of a month ago, probably at this point. And then yesterday I was going through it to sort of take notes to do this video because I was like, I really liked that, but I'm not going to be able to do it justice. And now I have 1, 2, 3 full pages of very small, typed, small handwritten notes on this. So we may be in for a little journey today, friends. So let's buckle down and figure out what happens when I start talking and simply don't stop talking until I'm done. It's a dangerous pastime that we're engaged in. Revenge is a collection of short stories by Yoko Ogawa. I believe it was... I don't actually know when it was initially translated into English. Let's see. Copyright 98 by Ogawa, and then copyright 2013 by the translator. It looks like it came out after The Diving Pool, The Housekeeper and the Professor, and Hotel Iris. I'm like 99% sure I read The Diving Pool, so maybe I'm actually not. It's like The Diving Pool and the Butterfly, I think is the English translation. Anyway, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't the last thing of hers I have to read until the next thing gets published, which will be great. Because after discovering Yoko Ogawa with the Memory Librarian, sort of on a complete whim, sometime in 2021, I want to say, I was like, damn, this person seems to write sort of a more politically engaged Murakami-esque fiction, and the Memory Librarian being her most recent one. And then I was basically like, yeah, that's cool. I'm very I like this quite a bit. I write a little blurb for it for the bookstore that I work at. And then a year, 2 years later, whatever it was, The Housekeeper and the Professor came into my field of view, again, just from working around books all the time. And I read it, and I think that was the first one I've talked about on this thing, this Just Bees Book Club, which is just for bees. I don't remember if I talked about it on this or not. Who cares? What I did do was find an extremely deep appreciation for her work, by reading it in contrast to the Memory Librarian in some ways, and just on its own terms. It's a different thing. And the most recent thing I read was Hotel Iris, which I talked about here very recently, which is fucked up. And quite good. Just very, very impactful on me. Like I said, truly, truly fucked up stuff happens in that book, and it's also kind of hot. And I don't know that this is my favorite thing of hers that I've read so far, but it might well be, which is shocking to me. Because when I finished, I was like, damn, that was great. And then, like I said, yesterday I went back and I just basically skimmed through each story to write a little. My goal was 3 sentences maximum, summary of the story, and I will be reading those. And this will be a long episode, like I said, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just read those and be like, oh, cool. Catchphrase, and the truth. But goddamn, have I been blown away by this book, especially on a light revisit. The thing that blew me away the first time through, and I'll get into this extremely more, is that I simply didn't know very much about it. I picked it up because I was like, oh yeah, Yoko Ogawa, she writes really cool, very varied stuff. I'm happy to read it. I was at the library, they had this. Hell yeah, let's go. The thing I didn't realize until 3 stories in, but then really until 4 stories in, was that this is a cycle. This is a collection of short stories that sort of build into their own weird little world. And I didn't do the thing that I never do because I generally don't like doing it. I'm not a lore person per se. If you're familiar with video games, I'm not a person who wants to dig into the interior plot elements, the things that precede the plot that inform the thing. That's simply not um, one of my primary interests. I'm not that interested in plot. I don't know if you didn't know this. I don't give a fuck. It's not interesting to me. I'm interested in words. I'm interested in language. I'm interested in reading, most of all. And that doesn't mean books. That means many things. Um, but god damn it, if this thing didn't surprise me by becoming this series of interconnected tales in such a way that I was personally excited about thinking about the idea of reading somebody's fucking like breakdown of the timeline of this shit, because she just handles it so smartly. She just is so good at being like, yo, here's a crumb. You know this? Do you know that character with the hand carrots? Is she a ghost now? What would that imply in terms of the kid that she raised? Huh? Was that her kid? Huh? It's so fucking. Uh, it fucked me up. And that's because, of course, the thing I will probably talk about the least, but that I want to make sure I say because it's the thing that is true. Because Ogawa's sentences are just strong. I think maybe more of a paragraph writer than a sentence writer in many respects, but like can turn an image, can engage with like the truly grotesque in ways that are aestheticized but not depoliticized, I guess. Can can just tell a story. Also, it's just a solid storyteller, which is a thing that's like really fucking um, drove home to me. I read shit. It must be the diving pool. Whatever. I've read some of her short stories before. I read the first short story in this actually probably like 6 months ago and was like, damn, that's a pretty good short story. But I didn't check it out at the library at the time because I wasn't checking things out because I was in the middle of reading some other shit. And then I checked this out and I'm like, God damn it. So yeah. uh, I like the idea that I said this might be short and I haven't even gotten to the little summaries, which I'm sure I will blather on about. I'm almost 10 minutes in. Let's go. So any things I missed in terms of my overall notes? Yeah, I wrote it overall doesn't quite hit the poetry of the housekeeper and the professor or the rawness of Hotel Iris, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to. Its aims seem more confined, but they largely hit the mark, and that mixed with a cool structure left me feeling good. And I disagree with myself to some point on that extent. The aims of the individual stories tend to feel a little more confined. The aims of the book as a project is whoa. Like all the things I just said, right? The way that she manages to tell this interlocking series of stories in a way that like made my ass go, but what about the timeline? Which is all I have to say because this is a Just Bees book club. If you're not a bee, you're not watching this. So asked and answered. Afternoon at the Bakery, the first short story in this collection of 11 stories. My summary: a woman waits to buy 2 strawberry shortcakes on the 12th anniversary of her dead son's 6th birthday. He died in a fridge in a lot. The square is prettily described. There's a clock tower with a weird little collection of like soldiers and chickens or something like that. Um, a woman isn't shocked by the announcement of the dead son, and the woman running the patissiere is distressed and doesn't emerge. Um, yeah. So like I said, I read the story 6 8 months ago, or whatever. Thought it was an extremely well written little thing. You know, it sort of jumps back and forth. It starts with her going into this bakery. The fact of her son's death is revealed in a conversation with this woman who is like trying to sell spices to the bakery. The woman has just a complete blank response, but the sort of temporality shifts back and forth between the woman who is the narrator of this being there and going to get a bakery for, or going to get a couple of strawberry shortcakes for her dead son, who's twice as long dead as he was alive, I guess, at this point, a thing I hadn't really thought about. Um, and the moment of finding out, the incident of going to the lot to see the fridge, to find the boy, to not believing that he's dead, that he must be sleeping, he must be tired because it's so hot out, etc. Um, the aftermath, the moldy strawberry shortcakes, the moment she herself has to know what it would have been like in his last moments, and so empties her own fridge and crawls into it herself, and her husband leaves her. All of these little details that are just little beautifully told moments that I don't know. It's a fucking well written short story is what I'm saying. It's what a lot of things are going to boil down to, baby. Second story, fruit juice. My handwritten description. A young man accompanies a classmate whose mom is dying to meet her bigwig father at a French restaurant. On the way back, she thanks him and eats a ton of kiwis sitting in an abandoned post office. This is a school story. Not a thing I super associate with Ogawa. I mean, Hotel Iris, the protagonist, is in school, but it's not. That's not a school story, as it were. Is that right? I don't remember if she's in school or just is school aged, and because I know she's working at the hotel, but I don't remember if it's because it's a summer thing or it's a family thing. But I can't remember if she's like still doing school. Anyway, um, yeah, this one is interesting. It's I think a lot more identifiably the memory police than other things, in the sense that it is I think primarily engaged with sort of the affect of alienation, of not quite knowing how to relate to people. You know, this girl is described as like extremely unremarkable. The boy who accompanies her, the protagonist, or not the protagonist, the narrator, is like doesn't know anything about her, doesn't really talk to her, like realizes midway through that he talked to her once, like in 3rd grade, when she was trying to grab a violin off a shelf, and was like, it felt bad because he shouldn't have, because he interrupted her. There's all these sort of like this roiling sense of alienation behind the scenes, and like the big climactic moment of the meeting, they're like their elected, or this girl elected father, is all told in inference, right? There's the excess of describing food being eaten, or his drinking and talking, versus their silence. You know, there's a big walk back when they're like offered to have a limousine ride back to their school or houses or whatever, and instead she says no, and then just aggressively walks back. And then it ends on this striking image, right, of them going like, oh, this is an old post office, right? I wonder what's the deal is. And they go over and they find out it's just full to bursting with kiwis, and she just sits there after a fancy French dinner and just devours kiwis until she doesn't anymore, and they go home and she says thanks. And then there's like a little bit of a codicil where it's like, well, I sort of never talked to her again. She immediately went back to being this unremarkable girl. I never visited her mom at the hospital like I said I would. The only time I like I messaged her or like sent her a letter was when um, I saw that the father had died like years later, and I sent her a thing that was sort of an apology, and she said like, no, you don't know how much it means to me. So there's this like, yeah, there's a sense of people who are not able to, or not in a position to connect with one another having this extremely intense emotional connection that doesn't lead to anything. That I think was, I think it's well done here. And then again, there's a striking image of just standing in a post office eating kiwis. Just wow. Um, Old Mrs. J. A writer moves into an apartment where the widow landlady grows kiwis and hand-shaped carrots. It turns out she strangled her husband and buried him in the garden, as well as dropping off kiwis in an abandoned post office. I really like this one. It reveals the shared universe. It's just fun. So yeah, this is the story where I don't know. I mean, there might have been a moment within Fruit Juice that ties back into An Afternoon at the Bakery, but I missed it if there was. Um, this one is pretty clear when there's this image of the writer sitting at her desk in her rented apartment and sees old Mrs. J, this woman who is like sort of like around the house, sort of bumbling, and she's like in her late 80s, maybe mid 80s at the earliest, like running into furniture, sort of like talking about the same thing over and over, forgetting conversations. And then it's like more adept in the garden, where she's very practiced at pruning things, and is maybe even a little bit more adept at her massage practice, where she seems to like possess an uncanny strength of some kind when watched by the narrator. But then there's this moment where the narrator like wakes in the middle of the night during a thunderstorm and sees somebody who's like, I'm pretty sure this is Mrs. J, and she's like sprinting from kiwi tree to kiwi tree, like dropping them all in cartons and just like, or not sprinting, and like going from kiwi tree to kiwi tree, kind of like filling a huge fucking box and just sprinting down this hill to this old post office and dumping them. And the narrator has this moment of being like, I just didn't know that she, had custody of the old post office or whatever. It's just sort of, it's this extremely striking, again, image that is contrasted with the character's reaction, which seems accurate to me, which is to say, like, you see some fucking weird shit, and you go, well, I guess I'll focus on this mundane detail so as to not have to really worry about this too much. That is a viable motivation in a character to me. The bigger things are like, another writer protagonist. This one I think is a dude. From my understanding, I believe there's a specific mention of that. Wait, no, it's not. It's not that. It's absolutely not. Sorry. Because she comes up in a later thing. Yes, got it. Is it the same? This might be the same writer as it in Afternoon at the Bakery. No. She's the writer of Afternoon at the Bakery. So anyway, this is the problem. I'm still making connections with this shit. Yeah. There's like a very good little moment at the end of it where like, or so the way that the narrator and Mrs. J sort of become acquaintances beyond simply being landlady and tenant is like, there is a moment where Mrs. J sees like a cat and she gets all pissed off and she's like, will you tell people to stop feeding that cat? And the person who's the tenant, the writer, is like, cats hate pine needles, so you put a bunch of pine needles down. And Mrs. J like talks over her and she just repeats it a couple times. And like the next day, Mrs. J spreads pine needles over and starts telling everyone that like when she was a girl she learned that cats hate pine tar and therefore she puts pine needles down. So it's basically taking the advice but spinning it so it seems like it was her own. And then at that point she starts coming over and like giving the writer like some things from her garden, and then eventually she gives a hand-shaped carrot to her to the writer, and this becomes a regular thing, and this ends up in the local newspaper coming by and like taking photos of them like holding up the hand-shaped carrots, and and writes a little news story, which then leads the police to come by and be like, "Where's did you notice anything weird, etc., etc." She brings up the Kiwis, um, and ultimately it's discovered that the old Mrs. J, whose husband she said was like just a useless drunken gambler who had like disappeared on the beach, was actually buried in the garden missing his hands. Hand carrots. Boom. Boom. Fun little story. And it kicks off this moment of like, yo, this collection's gonna be fun. The Little Dust Man. I think it's a Brahms concerto or something like that. I don't know shit about Brahms. I didn't write anything about that in the notes, so I just wanted to throw out that it's a piece of music of some kind. A man stuck on a train during an unseasonable snowstorm worries he'll be late to his stepmom's. A writer who won a small prize and wrote a story about hand-shaped carrots. Funeral. Someone's doing a crossword puzzle, and he remembers a visit to the zoo in the snow. This one to me is one of the more uneventful stories in this collection. Not gonna go on quite as long on this one. The thing that matters to me most at this point is like the way it connects to other things. Again, this is a nice story that it does a cute trick of, you know, setting the narrator in a place, sort of moving backwards through time in the same way that, for instance, Afternoon at the Bakery does, right? Like I'm going to the shop, I get in a conversation, I bring up my son's dead, I get to go back and you learn about the process of grief, etc., etc. The Little Dust Man is kind of similarly structured, but a little more in like larger chunks. Is that right? I actually want to say in smaller chunks, but longer. So I think it hops around a bit more, and I think it's just well done. And we get the writer, we get the carrots, we get the unseasonable snowstorm, and we get the visit to the zoo. Those latter two have not come up yet. Lab coats. Two hospital secretaries talk shit about. Sorry, I didn't write shit. Two hospital secretaries Two hospital secretaries talk about a doctor, one of them is seeing, who got stuck on a train in an unseasonable snowstorm. When he got back, he didn't want to divorce his wife for the secretary, so she kills him with a pair of scissors. This one has some extremely good homoerotic longing in it, some deep lesbian feelings, which is fun. And this one sort of sets up the rest of the universe in some way. I think it's like this one and the next two are sort of like the core of, I guess makes some sense, right? We're what, like, this is Afternoon, Fruit Juice, Old Miss J, Little Dust Man. So this is like 5, 6, and 7 of 11. Yeah, this is we're into the core of it. We're into the fucking meat here. The setup has happened. Will the conclusion happen? Who knows? I almost said play to find out what happens. You can't play. Just go read the book. And if you're a B, you've already read the book, right? I've read the book, and B has read the book. So, yeah, this is to me, this is the centerpiece of the universe in some ways. We have the snowstorm, we have this hospital, which is going to become extremely important to the rest of them. We have a murder of revenge. We have the secretary who's going to come up repeatedly. Yeah, a good story. I wanna see with this one if I can't. I feel like it's probably the next one that I can just pull a random line out of. But Yeah, yeah. I think this one is. It's just. It does. It's a good. It's a good, very short character study. What is this like? 51 to 58. So this is like 7 pages. It's a very tight character study. With a good little reveal at the end of it, basically. Um, I think that would be not a remarkable short story on its own, but a pleasant one. But the fact that it packs within that well paced little structure so many seeds for all of and fruits of the other previous stories. Seeds for future and fruits of previous stories here. I think it's just an extremely impressive little thing. Sewing for the heart. A bag maker looks for cardiology in the hospital from the previous story, while reminiscing about the bag he made for a woman who was born with her heart outside of her chest. In the process of making his bag, his hamster died and he buried it in a fast food garbage can. He proceeds with his plan to put the bag on her before she gets to surgery. Sorry. He proceeds with his plan to put the bag on her before she gets surgery to have it back in her chest, then cut it all off. There's a thing I'm doing here, which I think is extremely funny to me, which is all that really matters. Which is, if you read this book and have these stories in mind, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of doing a goofy summary here. Not laughing out loud at it. What? This is a fucking this is a fuck this is a fuck story. It's really fucked. This is like a tale of craft and obsession. It's a tale of like desire shunted off to just like 10 degrees of like wanting something just slightly wrong and wanting it that much more because of it. It's a story of a woman with a heart, like right, sorry, left, yeah. So it's like her heart, like literally, is like right here. It's like her actual heart that has arteries and veins like beating through it, and like you can just see it there. And the story opens almost femme fatale style, or like noir style, with her like coming into this bag make. Well, it doesn't open that way. It opens with him going up to one of the secretaries at the hospital and being like, "Where's cardiology?" And he's going up and we don't. And then he flashes back to like, "Oh, I've been a bag maker for 20 years. I really care about my bags." But the story like kicks off with this woman coming in, and I say noir style because she's like literally a lounge singer. But she like comes in and asks like, "Can you make a bag for a heart?" Or like, "I've heard you can make any kind of bag. Can you make one for a heart?" He's like, "For a heart? What?" And then he becomes so obsessed with the job that he eventually ends up hacking her heart out at the end of the story. So it's like a good noir tale. It's good. It's a good magical realist-ish thing. Like it doesn't quite break the bounds of believability. But like, yeah, I don't know. There's good detail in this, right? Like I've tried everything, she said. Silk, cotton, nylon, vinyl, paper, nothing is right. It has to be kept warm. Heat loss can be fatal, but then there are the secretions. If the material is too absorbent, it sucks up all the moisture. But then again, something like vinyl doesn't breathe. She explained that she was born with her heart outside her chest. As difficult as that might be to imagine, it worked normally enough, but its unique location made it extremely vulnerable. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a bag she wanted, at least not like any I had made in the past. But she was a customer, and I was determined to do my best to satisfy her. "I think sealskin would be ideal," I said, going to the shelf to get a sample. "It's soft and strong, and it repels moisture while providing superior insulation. Just what a seal needs. And it's easy to care for." "It sounds perfect," she said. Like, just, like, yeah, really good character work, really good detail work. And so much, again, we're back in the hospital immediately. This is the point where, like, 70 some odd pages in at this point. This is the point I'm like, this is singing to me. Because the first story, I'm like, this is a beautiful short story. Fruit Juice, I'm like, this is cool, and it has a really good image at the end, and it's dealing with themes that I'm interested in. Third story, I'm like, oh, we're in a universe. Okay, this Kiwi thing, this Kiwi post office thing. Okay, let's go. Little Dustman, I'm like, okay, this is a good story. This is a well-written story. I'm seeing that we're elaborating on some of the things. Lab coats, I'm like, oh, we're off for the races. And then Song for the Heart, I'm like, oh, you've done it. You've you've grabbed me. I am entirely in this at this point. This world is fleshing itself out. I'm asking myself questions that I don't even know I'm asking. I'm like, wait, so would this have been before or after the secretary murdered the boyfriend? Because like there's these little hints here and there. I don't think they're not actually hints. Um, they're just things that I'm picking up on because they have resonance. And this is the thing I think I'm most extremely in love with in terms of this book is like I don't think there's a canonical timeline here, or if there is, I simply don't care. What I love is there are the all these stories exist. Like I said, sort of up at the top when I read my own note, right? Like the stories themselves have fairly small aims. The structure is the thing that is this big swing. But I don't think it's a big swing because it is itself like a puzzle box. I think it's a big swing because you have to be careful when writing interlinked stories not to produce false harmonies, right? Or um, you know, dissonances, even harmonies or dissonance or disharmonies, dissonances. There's a delicate balance that must be struck for these to work beyond the level of going, oh, nice, hey, you did that thing. And at the time that Sewing for the Heart hits, by the time I'm reading uh, about the hamster in the trash can, I'm like, this book is singing to me. I really like this book, and I knew I did, but then I started taking notes on it. I was like, fuck me, this is really good. So we're like halfway through at this point. Okay. Welcome to the Museum of Torture. My description. A woman reflects on her... Excuse me. I have swallowed some spit. A woman reflects on a woman reflects on a rash of murders. A doctor, a patient, a hamster, and her boyfriend dips. She walks past the plaza clock and finds the Museum of Torture. There she takes a tour and learns about a torture that involves plucking hairs one by one, and thinks about her boyfriend. This is the weirdest story in here. Frankly, I mean, structurally speaking, it's like, it's the story of the woman who lives the floor below the secretary from Lab Coats, who heard some particular noises the night of, and so she starts the story by getting interviewed by the police, and then her boyfriend comes over. I don't think we learn until a later story that she's like 15 or 16, which I still haven't even really processed that bit. I think 16 is the age given, maybe, but an adolescent, maybe is actually as deep as they go in. But like she's a beautician, or in beauty school maybe. And so the story begins with like her getting interviewed by police, and then there's like reporters coming in, and then she sees her boyfriend, and they like hang out, and then she like gets obsessed with talking about the fact that the person upstairs was murdered, and her boyfriend's like, "Why do you think this is so funny?" And she's like, "I don't think it's funny. I just you don't need to talk about it." And he's like, "I'm fucking out of here." And then she is like, "Well, I wasn't gonna chase him, but I did want to take a walk, so I waited a little bit and I walked around, and I was really worried I was gonna see him." And then she like again walks through the plaza, sees the clock with the soldiers and chickens or whatever the fuck I said earlier. That I also didn't know what exactly the things were. And then she sees a sign that says "Welcome to the Museum of Torture." And so this story is just like, it's three acts, I guess, but they're also feels like disconnected. It's definitely again formally the strangest thing in here, which is a bummer because normally that sentence would mean I'm about to say, and we're off to the races. Let's talk about how this works, what, et cetera, et cetera. But it's no, not today, Satan. The man who sold braces. I should probably actually not jump straight to that one. The Museum of Terror is a place that she goes into. She has to like yell "excuse me" to get in. And a man shows up and is like, "Oh, like, are you here to donate an instrument of torture, or are you here to take a tour?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm here to take a tour." And he's like, "Oh, we've been waiting for you." And then they go on like a 3 hour tour, and they just like see instruments of torture from throughout history. They talk about, they just sort of detail them. Again, this is the reason I had to say all this is because, right, again, this is a collection called Revenge. So uh, that theme is running throughout here, right? And in a number of different ways. And then the last couple of things are like a funnel that drips water on somebody's forehead at an extremely specific, slow rate. The idea being this is we've moved into psychological torture away from things like Iron Maidens. And then the final one, like I said in the sort of description, is just a pair of tweezers with like extremely well worn handles. And so she sort of fixates on this as a beautician. She thinks about her boyfriend, whose hair she cuts every week or two, who's just left her because he thought she was making fun of these people being murdered. And then the story kind of goes like, "Huh, I wonder what'll happen next time I cut his hair." Um, and again, it's just so all over the place. It's like it's all over the place structurally. Again, not on a paragraph by paragraph level, because again, Ogawa has that shit dialed in. Whether she's writing, dystopian literature or borderline like Desaadian genre fiction, or just straight up literary fiction, like The Housekeeper and the Professor is. Like she can play in different genre modes, but I think consistently, paragraph by paragraph, never seen her fail, to my mind. Maybe I have low standards. I don't know. The man who sold braces, the nephew of the Museum of Terror curator, claims his body when he passes from asphyxiation in his hoarder-style apartment. He lived with a beautician briefly. This is more. This is, I think, the last like setup story that we get here. Because a lot of things will come out of this. We are getting the beautician and the curator from the previous story, obviously, and we're getting like sort of a thematic echoes, of course, of the little dust man, of the man going to visit his stepmother's, or trying to visit his stepmother's funeral, but being caught on a bus. There's a sense of children who aren't direct biological children, going to claim parents or grieve parents who were important to them, even though they were maybe complicated figures within the household when they were younger, things like that. There's a lot of thematic resonances going on there, but like largely this story is about like who the museum curator was throughout his life. He was the man who sold braces, a reference to the fact that he like invented a type of brace that was like guaranteed to make somebody grow 3 to 6 inches taller than they would without having used it. It was just like this extremely painful device. He was a man who like just, oh god, there's a phrase at like the beginning of it. He's like a man who changed careers like most men change socks, something like that. He became a butler, and that was like his most prestigious moment. The braces, it turns out, didn't sell very well, but he's like held on to them for his whole life as this thing where he still gets Christmas cards from people who thank him so much for basically torturing them into growing probably as tall as they would have, but not whatever. But I'm not an expert on fucking bone extensions or whatever the fuck. Gross. A lot of gross stuff in this. Again, it's a short story collection called Revenge. And I mean, the other resonance with the little dust man here for me is like, this is one of the more minor stories in this, which isn't to say it's not good. I jokingly said to myself that I might go 45 minutes on this, thinking, surely, it'll be shorter than that, at least. The last hour of The Bengal Tiger is the prettiest story in this collection. Like I said, I've been already sold on this multiple times throughout. There's so many specific things. I think without the sewing of the heart story in here, there's the possibility of too much of a sense of this being sort of a literary drama, like a tight family thing, where you would want to read this as like, it's not that each of these are like connected, but this is a specific family, and we're just doing like, one nuclear group of people all sort of like searching for each other, which is like, who cares? Because Sewing of the Heart gives us this element of magical realism. It brings in these characters who don't come back. It gives us a second murderer, which I think is extremely important. There's old Mrs. J, where I said, like, I was like, oh shit, we're doing a thing here. These Kiwis, this post office, we're doing a thing here. So like I said, I've been sold on this a couple times. I've had beautiful moments with language. Last hour of The Bengal Tiger. The doctor's wife drives to confront the secretary, but a crashed tomato truck leads her to meet the aged curator as the tiger breathes its last. She goes home. She was also bugged by the beautician. It is baffling how much of the shared universe stuff here happens in this. This is again this is page 122. Nope, already passed it. 120. This is a 9-page short story. Just like Lab Coats packs so much into such a short story, but differently from Lab Coats, which again I said, beautiful moments of like deeply repressed queer longing, lesbian longing, gay longing, whatever. This is like some of her best, just like straight up sentences. Yeah, setting aside all of the stuff that this story does to just connect stories past and future, which I'm only setting aside because like I'm saying there's also this other extremely cool thing, because I think that's a really cool thing. This is the thing that I've been talking about this whole time that I really fucking like. I really like it, and it's not usually the thing that I like about stuff. Usually the thing I like about stuff is to be like, hey, look at this sentence. It's pretty. Or, hey, look at this chapter. It makes me understand better how to end this shitty world that we live in. It's very rarely. Damn, did you see that connection between the things? Um, but for fiction, it's usually I want to talk about this pretty sentence. Um, um, gosh, where's the tomatoes? Where are these fucking tomatoes? No, it's just because she's already in the apartment building at that point. No, 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 no. I was pretty sure the driver was dead. His bones and organs would have been crushed by the steering wheel. But somehow this seemed less shocking to me than the fact that the surface of the road was covered with tomatoes. Not that I realized what they were right away. At first, I thought I must have driven into a field where an unfamiliar red flower was blooming, or that the driver's blood was covering the whole road. But it was tomatoes, flawless, ripe ones, shining in the sunlight. A workman with a shovel was trying to gather them up, but he was making no visible progress. A number of people stood near the accident looking dazed, and some men were trying to cut open the cab of the truck with an electric saw. Some tomatoes rolled in front of my car and must have been crushed under the tires, but I could barely feel them. They offered no resistance, as though they had wanted to be smashed all along, smeared across the road. The other cars swerved to avoid the tomatoes, but I decided to try to hit as many as possible. If I got more than 10, I would go on. I would follow the road where it led. In the rearview mirror, I could see a strip of crimson stretching out behind the car. Did hitting tomatoes feel the same as hitting a person? We're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ellipsis, margin, break. I don't know. Idle thoughts in stressful situations, etc., etc. Uh, Here we go. Okay. This is the last hour of the Bengal tiger. It's magnificent, I whispered. Magnificent indeed, the man said as he continued to caress the beast. Its black and yellow fur shone in the light. Its black and yellow fur shone in the light filtering down through the trees. The beautiful stripes, the enormous size, everything about the animal was perfect. Even lying prostrate, it seemed to be coiled and ready to attack. The paws looked heavy. The jaw was powerful and sharp fangs peeked out from its mouth. Every bit of the tiger seemed to have a purpose, to be ideally suited to the hunt. "It is yours?" I asked. "It is," the old man nodded. A shudder ran through the animal's belly and it groaned. "Poor thing," I said. I tried to concentrate my energy in the hand stroking the tiger's back. The fur was very thick and soft and pleasant to the touch. The more I stroked it, the more the scent of ferns filled the air. "There now," the man murmured. Then he turned toward me for the first time and smiled. The tiger's ears drooped and its tongue rolled from its mouth. It began to drool. With its last remaining strength, it pushed closer to the old man. "There now," the man repeated, wrapping his arms around the tiger's neck and rubbing his cheek against its face. The roses swayed in the hot breeze. Tiny insects danced above the lawn. Spray from the fountain misted down on us. "I'm afraid I'm disturbing you," I said, realizing that I was intruding on our last moments together. "Why would you say that?" the old man said, a hint of reproach in his tone. "You must stay with us. We need you here." Then he looked back at the tiger, his eyes full of pity. The tiger's breath grew fitful. Its throat rattled, its fangs clattered together. The tongue looked rough and dry. I continued to rub its back. It was all I could do. The old man held his cheek against the animal's head. The tiger's eyes opened and sought his face. When it was satisfied that he was still nearby, the eyes shut again in relief. Their bodies had become one. Cheek and jaw, torso and neck, paw and leg, bow tie and stripes. Everything melted together into a single being. The tiger let out a roar, and as the echo died away, so did the beating under my hand. The clicking of fangs stopped, and a final breath seeped from its lungs. Silence descended on us. The old man continued to hold the animal in his arms. I rose as quietly as I could and left the garden. I put the key in the ignition and looked down for a moment at my palms. I wanted to remember what they had just done. Then I turned the key. On the way back, the tomatoes were nowhere to be seen. I think that's very pretty. I think it's very pretty. Tomatoes and the full moon. A travel writer does laps in a pool for the writer of Afternoon at the Bakery because she haunts his assignment with her little dog. She's probably a ghost. They hang at a library and she gives some of the overturned tomatoes to the hotel cook. Um, this is one of the slighter ones in here. It's one of the only ones that like really strongly implies the possibility of ghosts. This is also, I think, the thing that confirms that the person who is in the train during the last Brahm, the little dustman, Jesus Christ, it's been doing this for an hour. I don't edit these fucking things. Is the son of the writer from Old Mrs. J, who wrote the story Afternoon at the Bakery. So all these are explicitly tied together here in a way that I can't remember if they were prior, but they definitely are at this point. Because the writer here gets shown to be the writer of Afternoon at the Bakery, and the reason that she seems to be haunting, or at least being around this travel writer, is because he reminds her of he looks exactly like a man who 30 years ago saved her from a snowstorm where she was going back from the zoo and was willing to die, but she had her 10-year-old son with her. And a man showed up in a car and let them in, and he looks spitting image of this travel writer who himself is about the age that her son would have been at this time. Also has a son of his own who's about 10, but he hasn't seen since he was 3. I think there's a connection in that last bit that I just didn't make. This is one that's just like, boom. It all comes together, baby. In a way I still don't understand. And I'm fine with that. You know, send me an email. No, I'm not going to tell you where. If you know, you know. Let me know fan theories if you're a bee, and only if you're a bee. Poison Plants is the last story in this collection. I cannot possibly hit the 60-minute mark. I cannot. I got to stop this. Poison Plants, an elderly painter, gives a budding composer a scholarship in order to hear his voice weekly, just for herself. He moves on, and she finds a refrigerator with a body inside, and then mourns herself? Boom, twist. It's another good one. Another well-written little thing. I like that it ends with the thing you would expect given the structure of this thing. They're like, okay, we're gonna wrap it all back around. But then she sees herself in it, which doesn't mean it can't have been the woman who found the boy in the refrigerator from the first story. Because there's also a woman there who seems like speechless and like she might be, theoretically like hallucinating that it's herself in there or something like that. Or that there's some sort of reincarnation thing happening, or any number of other potential explanations. But I like that it doesn't just end with like, and there was a 6-year-old boy. I called his mom, and she was a writer. ... The end. I appreciate that it sort of left things open, which is it's just good in general. It's just a good idea to do that in general. Like you don't have to write your own wiki. You don't have to write your own wiki. I think I gave my big, broad thoughts at the top. Talking through this was good, fun for me, which is important. I really like this book. Check it out from your local library. Go to the fiction section. Look see what they got in terms of Yoko Ogawa. He's a very good author. Really creeping up there for me in a way that, I mean, I'm now at the point where I'm thinking about rereading The Memory Librarian because I really liked it a lot, but it's like really dipped in my estimation as I've read her other works. But maybe we'll just shoot the fuck back up. Who knows? I'm sure she has something in the pipeline to be translated at least. Yeah, cool fucking book. I don't know. Books are cool. I read some cool books recently. Um, this is Nona Buzz, Jesby's Book Club. That's not how I end these things. This is not how I end these things. It's not how I end these things. Fuck. Thanks for not watching.